Okay, I think we'll go ahead and start the webinar here. It's about 1 or 2 minutes after the hour. So we're going to be talking today about the digital audio opportunity and covering the overview of the webinar is going to cover current trends. I'm going to talk first about current trends in digital audio, specifically around streaming, smart speakers, and podcasting, and go over some current research numbers showing digital audio growth. I'm going to discuss why inventory packaging across channels, across different audio channels, and workflow efficiency are more important than ever. And then lastly, we'll cover some tools and processes and insights for best managing and monetizing listeners however they access audio content. So my name is Jim Cont'd. I'm the Director of Product Management here at WideOrbit Streaming and WideOrbit On Demand. I've been in the digital audio space for about 8 years in product management. We're a member of a couple of the IAB committees, the Digital Audio Committee and the Podcast Technical Working Group. And I put that last point on here. I was fortunate to find some talented musicians and went through the process of writing our own music, recording it, and it really kind of got me hooked even more so on music and audio and how it's produced. And I just developed a deep passion for the space, and I'm here still in this very dynamic space and having fun 8 years later. So with that little intro, I'm going to go ahead and jump into audio trends and opportunities. And I think I'll mention that we'll have time for some questions after the webinar. So if you have any questions, I believe you can type them into the chat there, and we can go ahead and read them. Okay, so I'm going to go over some of these research numbers on digital audio, and I'll go over some of these pretty quickly because a number of you have seen these. This is a slide showing from the Infinite Dial from our friends at Triton and Edison, showing the continued growth of online audio consumption. This is weekly listeners. I like to use weekly because it represents more of a habit. Oh my gosh, this thing's. There we go. Represents really more of a habit than just one-off things every month. So we're about 160 million Americans listening to weekly audio, and it's growing about 10% a year. So the average time spent for these weekly listeners is, it's kind of flattened out a bit. And it's a good point that audio is not immune to the challenges all media types face today with all the different options people have to take up their time. So we just need to continue to produce good, compelling content. But the good news is that with the growth in digital audio consumption that we saw in the previous slide, audio consumption is still way up. So just a bit on smart speakers. This is also from the Infinite Dial a little bit earlier this year, an estimate of 50 million Americans owning a smart speaker, and this is up. That's 18%. This is up from basically zero about three years ago or so, 3 or 4 years ago. So it's really high growth on the smart speakers, and just recently, actually, Adobe was even more positive about it, showing that there's about 32% of consumers already own a smart speaker, and 16% more plan to purchase one over the holiday period. So that would be about 50% of Americans owning a smart speaker after the holiday period. Now, this slide shows the price of some entry-level, and very powerful smart speakers versus the price of a nice clock radio. So the reason that the smart speaker prices are so low is that many components of them are part of the smartphone supply chain, where they're producing hundreds of millions of devices a year, and this brings, of course, the component cost way down. So do we think the demand at some point for smart speakers are going to curtail? Obviously, it probably will at some point, but it will not be due to price. So the price point for these devices are very accessible to consumers. Now, what's great about smart speakers is that they are used today to access content that our industry produces. So you can see the top item is for music, and if you look at some of the other items, they're spoken word items like news, talk, and sports. And so the devices are being used today primarily for the content we produce, which is pretty exciting. Now, going to podcasting, consumption is up 10 to 20% a year, and it's about 50 million Americans listen to a podcast weekly, again, using the weekly numbers. It's still only 17% as of a little bit earlier this year. So there's a lot of growth available, and it does not show any signs of slowing down. Now, the reason or the driver for podcasting growth is primarily driven by smartphone usage. You can see that, according to Nielsen here, that computers and smartphones were used about the same in 2014 to listen to podcasts, but since then, podcast consumption via smartphones have really skyrocketed. So smartphones are really driving the podcast growth over the last few years. Now, TV, turning attention just briefly here to TV, they're seeing a need to come up with metrics to measure consumption, really no matter what the distribution platform is, linear or digital, live or on demand. And NBC Universal has developed its total audience delivery metric to measure viewing from different sources. Now, audio, I think is a bit behind here, but I would expect as digital consumption grows that we'll see similar effort in audio. In the meantime, the IAB podcast measurement guidelines were published recently, and they go a long way to provide clarity in podcast consumption metrics and provides more credibility really for the industry to advertisers. And just recently, earlier this week, it was cool to see NPR releasing its RAD initiative for measuring podcast consumption all the way to the player. So that brings podcasting more in line with other media measurement. Okay, so just reviewing the digital audio growth, really digital is the growth area for audio. And so the suggestion here is to continue to invest in it. There has never been more ways to consume your audio content than there is now, especially now as smart speakers continue to penetrate, into the home. So it's really crucial to adopt practices and tools that enable you to get maximum value for you and for your listeners across all platforms. And this is what we're going to cover here for the rest of the talk. Okay, so we have a term that we use internally and that kind of starting to talk a little more publicly about, and that is this concept of holistic audio. And so I'm going to illustrate that with really a simple example here. So this is an example of, on the screen, you've got a live streaming player consuming live content, and at the bottom is a podcast player, an on-demand player. So you have an advertiser that wants to associate with the host's content and audience, both live and on demand, because they want consistency of their message to the audience. So there should be an easy and straightforward way to sell that ad campaign, to traffic it, to track the progress, to invoice it across these different channels, and in this case, live and on demand. So what is holistic audio management? Well, it's easily managing and monetizing audio content across channels, across all the different channels of audio. In the past, we did one thing for live, we produced it in a certain way, we did another thing for on demand, we had different ways of selling, inserting ads, invoicing, etc. And one for live, one for on demand. And as you're going to see here, now the tools have evolved, the products are more evolved, and these can now be thought of more as just audio and how to manage and monetize audio. And so we can focus more on of our time on enabling our clients to reach the audiences that they want to reach with the messages that they want to have and deliver to those audiences. So just circling back, using that previous example, of the sponsorship campaign for both live and on demand. Here's an example in the WideOrbit streaming solution showing how that's done. The same audio ad will be inserted into live radio stream and the on-demand podcast for this station group. The same ads, the same creatives. You can track the progress side by side. So there's no silos of I'm going to do this one thing for live and now I've got to go to this other system for on demand. And it's an example of the maturing of the tools in the products now that on demand is growing and monetization is a real thing. Okay, so holistic audio, I just introduced that concept. So you can now think, and you should be now thinking about managing and monetizing audio content holistically and be less focused on or have different processes, whether it's live or whether it's on demand. So, the suggestion here is to ask your clients if they want to work across live and on demand in this case, or create packages for this, because it's now easier to do this end to end. All right, I'm going to jump here into some best practices and some examples of how to manage and monetize audio in its different forms. So these are WideOrbit products and screenshots I'm going to show. Other vendors may have similar tools, but this is really what you should be looking for to enable this concept of managing audio holistically. So first, just a bit about WideOrbit streaming product. So it's a tool to manage and monetize digital audio streams. So we do ingestion and delivery of live streams. We deliver it to all the popular devices out there. We insert ads, and you can do targeting to reach your listeners or reach listeners by geolocation, by device, by age and gender. Part of the system has demand going through it, or ad sales partners, and now programmatic digital audio to enable our customers to capture revenue from growing programmatic ad budgets. And the last point there is that we've got tools now that really are starting to integrate with on demand so that you can manage and monetize live and on demand together. So that's the WideOrbit streaming product. The WideOrbit on demand product is very similar. It's managing and monetizing, instead of live content, on demand content. So we deliver that podcasts or on-demand audio content to all popular devices, to consumers out there. We produce metrics on ads and downloads, and these are compliant with the IAB metrics or guidelines that were released. We insert ads and can do the same targeting that you can do with live streaming, and it has a set of tools to manage other files that are used inside podcasts, like branding files and intros and things like that. So it's a complete tool service for managing and monetizing on-demand content, audio content. Okay, so getting into some of the examples of holistic audio. So again, using that previous example that I mentioned of the sponsorship for live and on demand, here's just another screenshot for WideOrbit streaming. So the same audio ad is going to be inserted, or can be inserted, into the live radio stream and the on-demand podcast. If you were to add another WideOrbit product, which is the WideOrbit Traffic digital orders, it enables ad trafficking from a single tool for broadcast, for streaming, and for podcasting. So again, just really trying to blur the lines, if you will, between of what is the distribution channel of audio, and just kind of starting to erase those lines and just thinking about monetizing and managing your audio content. Another example is for campaigns that are spread across channels. You can have a single ad affidavit that contains performance information for both the live channel and the on-demand channel. And this makes it easier for invoicing. It combines the campaign data in a single place and just makes it very easy for the advertiser to see how it performed and to see the invoice. So there's not different silos of invoices or affidavits for live and for on-demand. Another best practice to take advantage is really to have tools to automatically capture and ingest live content for on-demand consumption. So there's a feature in WideOrbit streaming called, we call it broadcast to podcast, and it enables automatic, daily or periodic capture of live content, and then ingestion automatically into the podcast delivery system for podcast delivery. So you can configure it to remove unwanted content like traffic, updates, and news, things you don't want to go out in the podcast. You can optionally insert ads into the podcast. You can set it up to do that automatically. Really, the whole goal here is to streamline production workflow to easily enable your live content to be consumed and monetized on demand. So we're excited about something we're working on that will be ready next year, and we call it instant on demand is the term we use. And this is an illustration of how this is going to work. So this is a screenshot of a player that a consumer is using or interacting with, and the point here is that this is the schedule of this show. It's a spoken word show. In this example, the user can click on a previous show to listen to it anytime during the day. So let's say they missed your morning show and they're a fan of that. They can just click. Let's say it's noon or 2 in the afternoon. They can see the schedule and they can just click to listen to it. They didn't have to subscribe to a podcast. They didn't have to go to a separate podcast client. They can just listen to it easily from your station player or your app or website. And this is built kind of under the covers. We use one of the network technologies we use is called HTTP live streaming, or HLS, and it's just a way to store and deliver streaming content that makes this sort of thing possible. So it really, again, starts to blur the line between live and on demand, and it's just lowering the friction for consuming your content at any time and very easily. So this is something that we're working hard on, and we think it's just going to enable more and more consumption of your streamed content, your live content. Okay, when you think about managing audio holistically, you can think of using the targeting aspect of digital with the reach that broadcast provides. So targeting generally brings about a premium because you're narrowing, you're targeting the audience. But often there is a brand or reach aspect needed as well. So digital and broadcast can be very complementary for advertisers. Okay, so going over the observations and, the best practices, and what are the observations and actions. So again, you can start thinking of managing and monetizing your audio content no matter how it's being consumed. Solutions are available, as I've shown, that address these past disparate workflows of managing and monetizing linear and digital together. And what's great is our industry is taking a leadership position in certain areas around here, like, for example, the IAB podcast working group metrics guidelines and the NPR RAD initiative for measurement. And I would expect to see more coming from our industry regarding, measuring and then basically valuing audio consumption in all of its forms. Okay, so just to recap what I've talked about here, listening continues to move to digital consumption, primarily due to the rise of the smartphone and now with smart speakers. So digital is the growth driver for audio. I discussed the concept of holistic audio, meaning instead of being confined by processes and tools defined by different distribution technologies, like is this live or is this on demand, is this broadcast, products are now maturing and really blurring the lines of what the distribution channel is and enabling management of and monetization of the audio no matter how it's going out. And this means our lives as ad traffickers and salespeople will get easier without this complexity, and workloads should decrease around this trying to manage all these different tools for the different distribution technologies. And best of all, it's really opening up new ways to serve our advertising clients. Okay, so that was what we wanted to cover today. There are some time for some Q&A.
Yeah, hi Jim. This is Sean here at WideOrbit headquarters in San Francisco, and I've been silently lurking this whole time. Good morning, everybody. I'm Sean Roberts, the Corporate Communications Director for WideOrbit. And Jim, we just wanted to thank you for sharing your expertise with everybody here today. We're now going to turn to the questions that listeners have submitted during the presentation. And anyone who has questions are welcome to submit theirs through the questions pane in the attendee control panel right now. We'll pick them up and feed them on to Jim. If you don't have your question answered today or you can't stay on the line, you can always call our product support team. They can give you help with anything at 415-675-6775. And if your question is exceptionally detailed or peculiar to your WideOrbit traffic implementation, we may opt to skip over it for now just to keep things rolling along, but we promise to have someone get back to you who has knowledge of your particular implementation. So Jim, the first question that rolled in seems to be from people asking, since we're platform holders looking for a little look behind the curtain. And this person is wondering, how much are you seeing combined campaigns already where people are buying live streaming and podcasting inventory together?
We are seeing, and I don't see all the campaigns, but we are seeing more of that. We've seen recently where an advertising client wants to advertise live and then have kind of a sponsorship type of sponsorship campaign on the on-demand on the podcast. So kind of a pre-roll, post-roll, ads for the sponsorship part of the podcast. So that's an example where you could, again, use this, if you wanted to, the same ads and just say, I want this inserted in the live stream during the show, and I want this same ads inserted, as a pre-roll for this podcast. So we are seeing more and more of it, and that's an example of one I just saw last week. So yeah, people are starting to take advantage of this.
Super. Next question, Jim, is another look behind the scenes. I think this is principally about WO streaming. This person is wondering how much traffic we're seeing from smart speakers already.
I have seen with some of a couple of our larger broadcast clients around 5%, and so it's not a huge number, but it's growing from zero, and it's continuing to grow. So I think we're at about 5%, I would say, maybe on average, if I could extrapolate that to the rest of our customers, and growing. So yeah, I would expect that number to probably, just based on the installed base growing so much and people becoming more and more comfortable, I would expect that number just to continue to grow, maybe 10% next year, something like that, or up to 10% next year.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty big. Next question is about the instant on-demand feature that you showed. This person is wondering a little bit more about how it works, and can the same ads be played later as were played live, or can you swap them out?
Yeah, so okay, the way it works is I showed that on the screen, but you can envision looking at a go to a station website or app and seeing the schedule of the host. Let's just talk about a spoken word station for a minute. Seeing the schedule of the hosts, and a lot of times I'll go and I'll see that there was something going on earlier in the morning with a guest or just the host that I like to hear, and I didn't hear it. So you can just click on that earlier show and just listen to that previous show, basically on demand as instantly. That's what we call instant on demand. So just click on that, and boom, you're hearing the morning show in the afternoon, and you didn't have to go to a different podcast client or remember to do that, or click all over the place to try to get the podcast in the right episode. You can just do it, and just do it right from the page. And the way it works is, as far as ads, is because the ads are all personalized one-to-one anyway, the different ads are played when you do listen to it later on. So you still get the same, the broadcaster can, or the advertisers can still do their targeting, take advantage of reaching the audiences they want specifically for these scenarios where you're listening to it later on. So that's how it works, and we really feel like it's just going to lower the friction for consuming this content that publishers work so hard to produce. And instead of having it be, ephemeral, if you will, and just, stream live and that's it, or else, go through the podcast subscription, is just to be able to click it right from the station page. So, we're really excited about this, and like I said, it's going to be ready in 2019, probably the first half of 2019.
Excellent. That's exciting. I like the part about bending time and space too. Well, I'm pleased to tell you that we have run out of questions. So thank you very much, Jim, and for everybody for being here today. If you have further questions now or in the future, you can always contact our support team, 415-675-6775, or support@wideorbit.com. And also, Jim has his deets up on screen there as well if you want to call him or email him directly. I'm sure he'd be happy to hear from any of you. This presentation will be offered as a PDF, and you'll also be able to view it again. We'll send out the information in the next 24 hours that will tell you how to get it and how you can share it with others on your team should you wish to do so. And of course, we'd also love to know what you thought about today's presentation and how we can improve our future webinars. So as you sign off, a brief survey is going to pop up on the screen, and we're really grateful if you can take a few seconds to fill it out. So on behalf of everyone at WideOrbit, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your Wednesday.